"Don't worry, Evelyn," my daughter-in-law said as she handed me the coffee. "After today, everything will finally be settled." I remember the way she smiled when she said it. Too calm. Too polished. The kind of smile people wear when they've already rehearsed the ending in their head. I wrapped both hands around the porcelain cup and nodded politely, even though something inside me tightened. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the memory of my late husband warning me years ago that some people only become dangerous when money enters the room. The morning sunlight poured through the tall kitchen windows of my Connecticut home, reflecting off the marble countertops Nathan had insisted we renovate after Harold died. Vanessa claimed the old kitchen looked dated. Harold had loved that kitchen. He used to sit at the counter every Sunday morning reading the paper while bacon crackled on the stove. Sometimes grief arrives loudly. Sometimes it settles quietly into the corners of a house and waits for you every morning. "You should drink before it gets cold," Vanessa said, adjusting the diamond bracelet on her wrist. She stood across from me in an ivory pantsuit that probably cost more than my first car. At 38, she had perfected the art of looking effortless while calculating everything around her. My son Nathan walked into the kitchen at that moment, distracted by his phone as usual. "Howard's already at the office," he muttered. "We should leave in 20 minutes. He barely looked at me when he spoke. That hurt more than I liked to admit. Nathan used to call me every Friday night no matter how busy he was. After he married Vanessa, the calls became shorter. Then occasional. Then almost non-existent unless paperwork was involved. "I made your favorite blend," Vanessa said sweetly. "French roast. Extra cream." I looked down at the coffee. The surface trembled slightly in my hands. I suddenly realized Vanessa almost never made coffee for me herself. She usually asked Gloria to do it. Gloria had worked for our family for nearly 20 years. She knew exactly how Harold liked his eggs, exactly where I kept the Christmas china, exactly which flowers bloomed first. Every spring along the garden wall. Loyal people notice things others miss. "That's thoughtful," I said quietly. Vanessa smiled again, but this time her eyes shifted briefly toward the hallway. Nervous. Just for a second. Then Gloria entered carrying freshly pressed napkins from the laundry room. Her expression changed the moment she saw the coffee cup in my hands. I noticed it immediately because Gloria was not an emotional woman. In 20 years, I had seen her panic exactly once, the night Harold collapsed from his heart attack. But now she froze. Her eyes locked on the cup. Then on Vanessa. Then back to me. "Mrs. Carter," she said suddenly, moving faster than I'd ever seen her move before. "I'm so sorry." Her shoulder slammed into the side of the counter. The coffee flew from my hands and splashed across the front of my pale blue silk blouse. The cup shattered against the tile floor. Hot liquid dripped onto my slacks and pooled near my shoes. "Gloria," Vanessa snapped, her voice sharp enough to slice glass. "What is wrong with you?" The room went silent. Nathan looked up from his phone in annoyance while Gloria stood perfectly still, breathing hard. I stared at her. Not because she ruined my blouse. Because she looked terrified. Not guilty. Terrified. "I'll clean it up," Gloria whispered quickly, already reaching for towels. Vanessa stepped forward so abruptly that even Nathan looked surprised. "You've become unbelievably careless lately," she said coldly. "Maybe it's time we discuss whether this job is still appropriate for you." Gloria lowered her eyes immediately, but I caught the tremor in her hands. "It's all right," I said softly. "It was an accident." Vanessa turned toward me too quickly. "No, Evelyn, it wasn't all right. We're already late." Her frustration felt strangely disproportionate. It was only coffee. Only a stained blouse. Only 10 extra minutes before a meeting with lawyers. But then I noticed something else. The smell. Bitter underneath the cream and sugar. Almost medicinal. Faint, but there. My stomach tightened. "I'll go change," I said carefully. Nathan sighed. "Mom, can we please not drag this out today? Howard already has all the paperwork ready." Paperwork. That was the word everyone kept using lately. Paperwork for the trust. Paperwork for temporary oversight. Paperwork for protecting me after Harold's death. At 68 years old, I had somehow become the only person in the room expected not to ask questions about my own life. I walked slowly toward the staircase while Gloria cleaned the floor behind me. Halfway up the stairs, I turned back for just a moment. Vanessa was staring at the broken cup. Gloria was staring at Vanessa. And Nathan was staring at neither of them. That was the moment something cold settled into my chest. Because I suddenly understood that Gloria had not spilled that coffee by accident. She had stopped me from drinking it. The drive into downtown Hartford felt unusually quiet that morning. Rain clouds gathered above the highway, turning the late October sky a dull shade of gray that reminded me of old photographs left too long in the sun. Nathan drove with one hand on the steering wheel while checking emails with the other. Vanessa sat in the passenger seat scrolling through her phone as though the entire morning had not happened. No one mentioned the coffee. No one mentioned Gloria. But I could still see the fear in her eyes when the cup shattered against the floor. I sat in the back seat beside my leather handbag and stared out the window at the passing trees. Harold used to hate silence in the car. He always filled it with stories or terrible Sinatra impressions that made Nathan laugh when he was little. After 42 years of marriage, you begin measuring love through small sounds. A cough in the hallway. A drawer opening upstairs. Footsteps you recognize before you even hear them fully. Grief is strange because the world continues moving exactly as before while one person disappears completely from it. Howard already prepared the guardianship documents, Vanessa said casually without turning around. This should all be quick. I looked up slowly. Guardianship? Nathan finally glanced at me through the rearview mirror. Temporary oversight, Mom. It is just a precaution. Precaution. Another soft word people use when they want control without sounding cruel. I have managed my own finances for nearly 50 years, I replied calmly. Vanessa smiled faintly. Of course you have. But after everything with Harold, everyone is just concerned about stress affecting your memory. Memory. There it was again. The word they had been carefully planting for months like seeds beneath the soil. Tiny comments. Tiny concerns. You already told me that story. Did you forget your appointment? You seem confused lately. At first I thought it came from worry. Now I was not so sure. The law office occupied the top floor of a modern glass building overlooking the Connecticut River. Harold had hated modern architecture. He used to say buildings should feel solid enough to survive a storm. This one looked like it would blow away in strong wind. Howard Mills greeted us in the lobby with a polite handshake and tired eyes. He had represented our family for almost 20 years. I noticed his expression change slightly when he saw me. Not warmth. Unease. Evelyn, he said quietly. You look well today. Today. Another strange choice of words. Vanessa stepped in before I could answer. She is doing much better this week. This week. I watched Howard carefully. He avoided my eyes for half a second before leading us toward the conference room. That half second told me more than an hour of conversation could have. Something had already been discussed before I arrived. The conference room smelled faintly of polished wood and expensive coffee. A long walnut table stretched across the center beneath soft recessed lighting. Neat stacks of papers waited beside crystal water glasses arranged with perfect symmetry. Vanessa sat immediately beside Howard while Nathan took the seat across from them. They left the chair at the far end for me. Separate. Isolated. Intentional. We are only trying to simplify things during this difficult transition, Vanessa said gently as Howard opened the folder. Her voice had changed again. Softer now. Concerned. The performance was almost impressive. Howard adjusted his glasses. These documents would allow temporary financial supervision while major estate matters are finalized. By whom? I asked. Howard hesitated. Vanessa answered instead. Nathan and I together. I folded my hands quietly in my lap. And why exactly would I require supervision? Nathan exhaled heavily like a frustrated parent. Mom, nobody is attacking you. I did not say they were. Howard slid several papers toward me. The arrangement is standard under certain circumstances. I glanced down at the documents. Medical evaluation recommendations. Financial oversight authorization. Cognitive wellness observations. My eyes stopped on one sentence near the bottom of the page. Concerns regarding recent episodes of confusion and impaired judgment. For a moment, the room became very still. I could hear the hum of the heating system overhead. The ticking of Howard's silver watch. The distant siren of an ambulance somewhere below the building. Confusion. Impaired judgment. Someone had been building a case against me quietly, carefully, methodically. I looked up at Nathan first. My son could not even meet my eyes. Do you truly believe I cannot manage my own life? I asked softly. He rubbed his forehead. Mom, this is temporary. Temporary arrangements have a way of becoming permanent once signatures appear on paper. Vanessa leaned closer toward me with practiced sympathy. We are only trying to protect you. Then she placed a pen gently beside my hand. The same way a nurse might hand medication to a patient who no longer understands what she is swallowing. And suddenly, for the first time since Harold died, I realized I was no longer sitting in a family meeting. I was sitting in an ambush. I did not sign the papers. I simply placed the pen back on the table and folded my hands together while Howard cleared his throat awkwardly across from me. Vanessa recovered first. She always did. Nobody is forcing you to decide today, she said with that polished voice she used whenever other people were watching. We only thought it would ease some pressure for you. Ease pressure. The woman spoke about dismantling my independence the same way someone might discuss changing curtains for the season. I appreciate everyone's concern, I replied calmly. But I would like my own physician to review these recommendations first. Nathan leaned back in his chair with visible frustration. Mom, Dr. Feldman already evaluated you last month. I looked directly at him. Dr. Feldman was recommended by Vanessa. The silence that followed was small but important. Tiny fractures tell you where a structure eventually breaks. Howard removed his glasses slowly and rubbed the bridge of his nose. That is certainly your right, Evelyn. Vanessa crossed one leg over the other, but I noticed her heel bouncing once beneath the table before she stopped it. Nervous again. Just for a second. Perhaps we should revisit this next week, she said. After everyone has rested. Rested. Another careful word. Everything around me suddenly felt rehearsed. Even the pauses. Howard gathered the documents while Nathan stared out the conference room window toward the river below. He looked exhausted. Older than 40. I wondered when exactly my son had stopped being his own person. Some people do not notice manipulation while it is happening because it arrives wrapped in affection and practicality. Harold used to say the most dangerous people are rarely loud. They simply position themselves near the controls. By the time the meeting ended, rain had started tapping softly against the tall windows outside. Vanessa insisted she and Nathan needed to stop by another office downtown before returning home. I can call the driver for you, she offered quickly. No need, I said. I would rather have some air. She hesitated. Just slightly. Then smiled. Of course. I watched the three of them disappear toward the elevators while I remained standing near the lobby fountain pretending to check messages on my phone. Howard avoided looking back at me. That bothered me more than anything else. Guilt has weight. You can see people carrying it in their shoulders. I left the building 10 minutes later and walked slowly beneath my umbrella through the cold afternoon drizzle. Hartford smelled like wet pavement and coffee drifting from nearby cafes. Normally I would have called Harold after a meeting like that. He would have listened quietly while driving back from the office, then he would have said something simple that made everything clear. That was his gift. He could untangle confusion without raising his voice. I missed him most on days that required courage. When I arrived home, the house felt unusually still. Too still. Gloria appeared almost immediately from the hallway near the laundry room. Her face looked pale beneath the kitchen lights. Mrs. Carter, she whispered. Could I speak with you privately? I studied her for a moment before nodding. We moved into the small sitting room beside the library where Harold used to read every evening after dinner. The fireplace remained unlit, but the room still carried the faint scent of cedarwood and old books. Gloria closed the door carefully behind us. Then she stood there twisting her hands together in a way I had never seen before. "I am sorry about this morning," she said quietly. "I know I ruined your clothes." "You did not do it by accident," I replied. Her eyes widened immediately. Not offended. Relieved. That told me everything. Gloria lowered herself slowly into the armchair across from me. I did not know what else to do. Her voice trembled now. "I saw her put something in your coffee after Mr. Nathan went upstairs." The room seemed to shrink around me. Outside, rain tapped steadily against the windows. "Are you certain?" I asked. Gloria nodded quickly. She thought I was still outside bringing in the dry cleaning. I came through the back entrance and saw her at the counter. She poured something from a small bottle into your cup. My fingers tightened around the edge of the sofa cushion. "Did you recognize it?" "No." But she hid it immediately when she heard me. Gloria swallowed hard before continuing. Then she smiled at me like nothing happened. I closed my eyes briefly. Suddenly dozens of small moments from the past year began drifting through my mind like puzzle pieces finally turning in the correct direction. The dizzy spells. The unusual fatigue. Vanessa insisting on handling my medications after Harold died. Vanessa scheduling appointments without asking me first. Vanessa repeatedly suggesting assisted living communities for convenience. "There is something else," Gloria whispered. I opened my eyes again. She reached carefully into the pocket of her grey cardigan and removed a folded napkin sealed inside a plastic sandwich bag. Brown coffee stains marked the edges. "I wiped some of the coffee from the counter after the cup broke," she said. "I thought maybe you should keep it." I stared at the bag resting in her shaking hands. Such a small thing. A stained napkin from an ordinary morning. Yet something deep inside me already knew my life had quietly divided into two parts. Before that coffee. And after it. That night I barely slept. The storm outside rolled across Connecticut in long stretches of cold rain and distant thunder while the old house creaked softly around me. I sat alone in Harold's study wrapped in a wool blanket, staring at the plastic bag Gloria had handed me hours earlier. A stained napkin. Such an ordinary object. Yet I could not stop looking at it. At 2 o'clock in the morning, I finally placed it carefully inside the locked drawer of Harold's desk beside our passports and insurance papers. My hands were steady. That frightened me more than panic would have. Fear usually announces itself loudly. Real danger arrives quietly and sits beside you in silence. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 3 times before I finally turned off the lamp and walked upstairs. As I passed the family portraits lining the staircase wall, I stopped in front of one taken 15 years earlier on Cape Cod. Nathan stood between Harold and me, smiling with the kind of happiness that cannot be rehearsed. Vanessa had not entered our lives yet. Back then my son still looked directly at people when they spoke. Back then family dinners lasted for hours. I touched the edge of the frame gently before continuing upstairs. The next morning, sunlight broke weakly through the clouds, leaving silver streaks across the wet lawn outside my bedroom windows. I dressed carefully in cream slacks and a cashmere sweater before going downstairs. Habit mattered. Routine mattered. Dangerous people pay close attention to disruption. Vanessa was already in the kitchen arranging fresh flowers near the sink when I entered. White roses. Harold hated white roses because funeral homes used them too often. Vanessa knew that. "Good morning," she said pleasantly without turning around. "You seem rested." I poured myself tea instead of coffee. I slept well enough. Her eyes flicked briefly toward the kettle. Tiny disappointment. Gone almost immediately. Nathan entered a minute later wearing a navy suit and loosened tie, already distracted by business calls before breakfast. "Morning, Mom." He kissed the air near my cheek rather than my actual face. That small detail broke something inside me more than I expected. Children slowly drift away from parents over time. That is normal. But emotional distance created intentionally feels different. It feels engineered. "You left before dinner last night," Vanessa said lightly while arranging fruit onto a plate. We were worried. Worried. Another carefully selected word. I had a headache, I replied. Probably stress. I watched her reaction closely. Satisfaction flashed across her face for less than a second before she masked it with sympathy. There it was again. The performance. Nathan sat across from me scrolling through financial reports on his tablet. Howard called this morning, he said. He hopes we can finalize the trust paperwork by Friday. Friday. 4 days away. Everything suddenly felt accelerated. Too accelerated. There is no rush, I answered calmly. Nathan looked up with visible frustration. Mom, this process affects the entire company. Harold Carter Industries employed nearly 400 people across New England. My husband built it from a 2-room logistics office in 1981 into one of the largest regional freight management firms in the state. Harold used to joke that trucks paid for every vacation we ever took. After his death, the company transferred into a family trust structure designed to protect long-term control. At least that was what I believed. Vanessa placed a plate of toast near me. Nobody wants you overwhelmed by responsibility right now. Responsibility. Such an interesting thing for her to mention considering she had never shown interest in the company until Harold died. Before then she barely attended corporate events unless photographers were present. But during the past year she had suddenly become involved in everything. Board meetings, financial discussions, estate planning dinners, even medical appointments. Especially medical appointments. My tea suddenly tasted bitter. Not physically bitter. Emotionally bitter. Because memories were beginning to rearrange themselves in my mind. 3 months earlier Vanessa insisted I switch physicians after Dr. Levin retired. You need someone younger and more current, she told me at the time. The new doctor, Feldman, spent most appointments asking strange questions about memory lapses and fatigue rather than my actual health concerns. 6 weeks ago Vanessa offered to organize my medications because she claimed the labels were confusing. 2 weeks ago she suggested converting the downstairs guest room into something safer long-term so I would not need to climb stairs as often. At the time, each suggestion sounded thoughtful. Together they formed something else entirely. Something cold. Something strategic. Gloria entered quietly through the side door carrying grocery bags from the market. Her eyes lifted toward mine for only a second before dropping immediately. Fear again. Real fear. Vanessa turned toward her sharply. You forgot the sparkling water. I can go back, Gloria said quickly. No, Vanessa replied. Just try to pay attention today. The room fell silent after that. I stirred my untouched tea slowly while morning light filled the kitchen around us. Then I noticed something else. Gloria was no longer wearing the gold cross necklace she had worn every single day for nearly 20 years. I remembered Vanessa grabbing Gloria's arm after the coffee spilled yesterday morning. Hard enough to make the necklace snap perhaps. Hard enough to remind her exactly who controlled the house now. And suddenly I realized something even worse than the possibility that Vanessa wanted my money. She wanted witnesses to stay afraid. By Thursday morning I understood something clearly. Panic would help Vanessa. Calmness would help me. So I stopped reacting. I smiled during breakfast. I thanked her for meals I barely touched. I even apologized to Nathan for seeming emotional. During the meeting at Howard's office, the relief on Vanessa's face was immediate. She believed the pressure was finally working. Dangerous people always become careless the moment they think they have one. Outside, autumn had settled fully across Connecticut. The maple trees lining our property burned deep shades of orange and crimson beneath the cold morning sky while landscapers blew leaves across neighboring estates. Wealthy neighborhoods often look peaceful from a distance. Perfect hedges. Quiet streets. Expensive windows glowing warmly at dusk. But behind those walls, people still betray each other for money every single day. Sometimes especially for money. Gloria avoided speaking openly inside the house after our conversation in the sitting room. She moved carefully now, almost silently, as though she feared every sound might carry through the walls. Twice I noticed Vanessa watching her from the upstairs hallway with narrowed eyes. Measuring her. Evaluating her. I began locking my bedroom door at night for the first time in 42 years. Harold would have hated that. He believed a home should be the one place in the world where fear never enters. Thursday afternoon, while Vanessa attended a charity luncheon in Greenwich and Nathan remained at the corporate office, I finally opened Harold's desk again. The study smelled faintly of leather, cedar, and old paper. Sunlight stretched across the hardwood floors in long golden strips while dust floated quietly through the air like drifting ash. Harold kept everything organized with military precision. Tax files, contracts, family records, even birthday cards sorted neatly by year. I sat in his chair slowly and rested my fingers against the smooth oak surface where he used to work late into the evenings. For a moment grief nearly swallowed me whole. Then I remembered the papers Howard placed in front of me. Confusion. Impaired judgment. Temporary guardianship. Grief hardened into something colder. I unlocked the lower right drawer and removed the trust documents Harold finalized 6 months before his death. At the time, I barely glanced at them because I trusted him completely. Now I read every page carefully. My eyes moved slowly across legal language until one section near the back stopped me completely. Amendment clause. Conditional transfer protections. Additional review required in the event of medical incapacity claims involving non-blood family members. I sat up straighter immediately. Harold had added that clause personally only 3 months before he died. Attached behind it was a handwritten note in his familiar dark blue ink. Evelyn, if anyone ever pressures you to surrender control quickly, wait. Time reveals intentions better than emotion ever will. My throat tightened painfully. Harold knew something. Maybe not everything. But enough to worry. Enough to prepare safeguards quietly behind the scenes. I continued reading. The amendment required independent neurological evaluations from 2 separate physicians before any family member could assume temporary control over trust assets. Not one physician. 2. Completely independent. Vanessa and Howard had never mentioned that during the meeting. My pulse slowed instead of quickening. Calmness again. Clarity often arrives the moment fear begins losing its grip. I carefully photographed every page using my phone before returning the documents exactly where I found them. Then I noticed another folder tucked beneath the trust records labeled private correspondence. Inside were several printed emails exchanged between Harold and Howard during the final weeks before Harold's death. One line made my stomach turn cold. Vanessa has become unusually interested in the succession structure. Please ensure Evelyn remains fully protected if anything happens unexpectedly. I read the sentence 3 times. Harold noticed it too. The concern. The ambition. The sudden interest in control. Yet he never told me directly. Perhaps he hoped he was wrong. People who love deeply often hesitate before believing the worst about family. I heard footsteps moving downstairs and quietly closed the folder. Moments later Vanessa's voice floated through the foyer. Evelyn, she called sweetly. Are you home? Her timing felt too precise. Almost as though she disliked me being alone with Harold's records. I slipped the photographs into a hidden folder on my phone before leaving the study. Vanessa stood near the staircase wearing a cream trench coat and carrying shopping bags from designer stores. She looked elegant, composed, untouchable. There you are, she said warmly. I stopped by the bakery and picked up your favorite lemon scones. She held the white bakery box toward me with perfectly manicured hands. For one brief second I stared at the box without moving. Because 2 days earlier I would have seen kindness. Now all I saw was strategy wrapped in ribbon and tissue paper. Vanessa tilted her head slightly. Are you all right? I smiled softly. I am beginning to feel much better actually. Something flickered behind her eyes then. Not disappointment exactly. More like calculation adjusting itself in real time. And in that moment I realized the game inside this house had quietly changed. Because Vanessa still believed I was becoming weaker. She had no idea I was finally starting to pay attention. Friday morning arrived cold and painfully clear. Frost clung to the edges of the garden hedges outside while thin sunlight spread across the back lawn like pale glass. I stood alone in the kitchen before sunrise, listening to the low hum of the refrigerator and the distant ticking of the hallway clock. The house felt different now. Not physically different. Spiritually different. Once you understand people are hiding intentions from you, every room changes shape around that knowledge. Every conversation becomes layered. Every kindness develops shadows. I poured myself oatmeal into a small bowl and deliberately left it untouched on the counter when Vanessa entered wearing cream slacks and a fitted camel sweater. Her eyes moved immediately toward the untouched food. "You should eat something," she said gently. "You have seemed weak lately." Weak. That word again. I pressed 2 fingers lightly against my temple and gave her a tired smile. "I have not been sleeping very well." The concern on her face looked convincing enough to fool almost anyone. "Maybe you should postpone the board dinner tonight," she suggested carefully. "Stress is not helping your condition." Condition. I nearly admired how strategically she chose her language. Never direct accusations. Never outright cruelty. Just a slow, steady campaign designed to reshape how others saw me. Frail. Forgetful. Vulnerable. Easier to manage. "No," I replied softly. "Your father built this company with me. I should still attend." Nathan entered moments later, adjusting the cuffs of his shirt while checking stock reports on his phone. "Howard confirmed tonight," he said distractedly. "The board wants clarity about the trust structure before next quarter." I nodded slowly as though the conversation exhausted me. "Of course." Then I deliberately reached for my tea and let my hand tremble slightly before setting the cup back down. Vanessa noticed immediately. So did Nathan. His expression shifted from irritation to concern in less than a second. That hurt more than anger would have. Because concern meant the narrative was working. "Mom," Nathan said quietly, "maybe Vanessa is right. You do not seem like yourself lately." I lowered my eyes carefully. "Perhaps I am simply tired." Vanessa stepped closer and placed her hand gently against my shoulder. The gesture would have looked comforting to anyone watching. "Nobody expects you to carry everything alone anymore," she whispered. I almost laughed at the precision of it. Carry everything alone anymore. Translation: surrender control willingly so nobody needs to take it from you publicly. By noon the house became busy with preparations for the evening board dinner. Staff moved through the dining room arranging silverware and floral centerpieces while caterers delivered trays through the side entrance. Harold always hosted quarterly board dinners at the house because he believed business relationships became stronger over good food and personal conversation. Vanessa transformed them into performances. Perfect flowers. Perfect lighting. Perfect photographs for social media. Every detail polished until nothing authentic remained underneath. Around 2 in the afternoon, I found Gloria alone in the pantry organizing wine glasses with nervous hands. "You should be careful," she whispered without looking directly at me. "She watches everything now." I closed the pantry door gently. "Behind me. Have you seen anything else?" Gloria hesitated. Then nodded once. 3 nights ago she was in Mr. Harold's study after midnight. My pulse slowed instead of quickening. Calm again. "Doing what?" "Searching through papers," Gloria answered quietly. When she heard me in the hallway she closed everything very quickly. That confirmed it. Vanessa was hunting for something specific. Probably the trust amendments Harold added before his death. The same amendments she clearly did not know existed completely. "Do not let her know we have spoken again," I said softly. Gloria swallowed hard. "Mrs. Carter, I think she is becoming desperate." Desperate people accelerate mistakes. That thought remained with me the rest of the afternoon. By evening the house glowed with warm amber light spilling from crystal chandeliers while luxury sedans rolled steadily up the long circular driveway outside. Members of the board arrived in tailored coats and polished shoes carrying expensive wine bottles and carefully rehearsed condolences about Harold's passing even after almost a year. Wealthy people often treat grief like networking etiquette. I wore a black velvet dress Harold once bought me in Manhattan for our anniversary and pearl earrings passed down from my mother. Vanessa studied me carefully when I entered the dining room. "You look beautiful tonight," she said with visible surprise. I smiled faintly. Thank you. For the first hour I played my role perfectly. Slightly distracted. Slightly fatigued. Quiet during conversations about corporate projections and shipping contracts. Twice I intentionally lost track of minor details during discussions. Vanessa relaxed more each time. Nathan began answering questions on my behalf without even realizing he was doing it. Exactly what she wanted. During dessert, Howard finally arrived carrying a leather portfolio beneath his arm. His expression tightened the moment he saw me seated calmly at the head of the table. Vanessa stood immediately and exchanged a quick glance with him across the room. Tiny. Fast. But I caught it. Howard approached carefully. Evelyn, he said. I hope you are feeling well tonight. I folded my napkin slowly onto the table and looked directly into his eyes for the first time since the meeting downtown. Better every day, I answered. Then I watched something flicker across his face. Not relief. Fear. The moment I saw fear in Howard's eyes, I knew two things immediately. First, he understood far more than he admitted. Second, he was beginning to realize the situation inside my house was no longer under control. The dinner continued around us with forced elegance. Crystal glasses clinked softly beneath chandelier light while board members discussed quarterly earnings and shipping contracts as though nothing unusual existed beneath the polished surface of the evening. Wealthy people become experts at pretending comfort while tension slowly poisons the room. Vanessa sat near the center of the table, smiling flawlessly through every conversation. She refilled wine glasses before anyone asked. She laughed at stories half a second too quickly. To everyone else she looked like the perfect corporate wife supporting a grieving family through transition. But once you recognize manipulation, you begin noticing the rhythm behind every gesture. The company has remained remarkably stable considering the circumstances, one board member said while cutting into his filet mignon. Nathan has stepped into leadership naturally. Vanessa touched Nathan's wrist affectionately beneath the candlelight. He learned from the best. Nathan smiled faintly but looked exhausted. Dark circles had formed beneath his eyes during the past year. Pressure changes people physically. Especially pressure they do not fully understand themselves. I remained mostly quiet through dinner, occasionally pressing my fingers against my temple as though fatigue still lingered. Vanessa noticed every small movement. Twice she asked if I needed to rest upstairs. Twice I politely refused. Howard barely touched his food. Around 9 o'clock, coffee and dessert were served in the sitting room overlooking the back gardens. Rain had returned outside, streaking softly against the tall windows while guests settled into leather chairs and low conversation. I accepted tea instead of coffee. Vanessa noticed that too. She noticed everything now. Gloria moved carefully through the room carrying silver trays with visible tension in her shoulders. When she approached Howard, he quietly thanked her without lifting his eyes from the table. Guilty people avoid witnesses instinctively. I sat near the fireplace listening while board members discussed expanding operations into Rhode Island next year. Harold would have enjoyed this conversation. He loved growth plans. Loved strategy. Loved building things slowly and correctly. Vanessa suddenly stood near the mantel with graceful confidence and lifted her wine glass lightly. Before everyone leaves, she said warmly, I just want to acknowledge Evelyn's strength this past year. The room quieted immediately. I watched her carefully over the rim of my teacup. Losing Harold affected all of us deeply, she continued. But especially Evelyn. We only want to ensure she feels supported moving forward. Supported. Another word carrying hidden machinery underneath it. Several board members nodded sympathetically. Vanessa stepped closer toward my chair. Nathan and I have been helping manage some of the more overwhelming responsibilities lately. And honestly, I think it has brought all of us closer as a family. There it was. The setup. Soft public framing before official legal changes. Position the audience emotionally first. Then introduce authority transfer later as an act of compassion rather than control. I set my teacup down carefully. That is thoughtful of you to say, I replied quietly. Vanessa smiled. We all care about your well-being. I looked around the room slowly before speaking again. In fact, I continued calmly, perhaps this is the perfect time to discuss family transparency. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Tiny movements. Tiny reactions. Howard straightened in his chair. Gloria froze beside the doorway holding a tray. Vanessa's smile tightened almost invisibly. Transparency? Nathan repeated. I nodded once. Harold believed transparency protected families from misunderstanding. Then I stood slowly from my chair and crossed toward the antique cabinet near the fireplace where Harold once stored business records during board gatherings. I removed a slim leather folder from inside the cabinet and returned to the center of the room. No one spoke. Rain tapped softly against the windows behind me. A few days ago, I said evenly, I reviewed the trust amendments Harold finalized before his death. Vanessa's face remained composed, but the color beneath her makeup faded slightly. Nathan frowned in confusion. What amendments? He asked. I opened the folder carefully. The ones requiring independent neurological evaluations before any transfer of authority can occur. Silence. Heavy silence. Howard looked down immediately. Vanessa recovered first. Evelyn, she said gently, this does not seem appropriate for tonight. Actually, I replied softly, I think tonight is exactly the appropriate time. My voice never rose. It did not need to. Calmness unsettles dishonest people more than anger ever will. I removed several printed pages from the folder and handed copies to 2 senior board members seated nearest me. I also found correspondence between Harold and Howard expressing concern about pressure regarding succession control. Nathan turned sharply toward Howard. What is she talking about? Howard swallowed visibly before answering. Harold requested additional legal protections shortly before his passing. Vanessa stepped forward immediately, because he worried Evelyn would struggle alone after losing him. Her response arrived too fast. Too rehearsed. I looked directly at her. Then why was I never informed those protections existed? For the first time all evening, Vanessa had no immediate answer. The room grew painfully still around us. One of the board members lowered his papers slowly onto the coffee table while reading the amendment clauses. Nathan stared between me and Howard with growing confusion. Then Gloria spoke quietly from the doorway. Because some people hoped Mrs. Carter would sign before discovering them. Every head in the room turned toward her at once. Vanessa's expression changed instantly. Not shock. Fury. The silence after Gloria spoke felt heavier than the storm outside. Rain pressed against the tall windows while every person in the room stared toward the doorway where she stood holding the silver tray with trembling hands. Vanessa recovered first, but this time the mask slipped before she could fully rebuild it. Excuse me, she said sharply. Gloria lowered the tray onto a side table with visible care. Mr. Harold changed the trust protections because he was worried, she said quietly. He said Mrs. Carter should never be rushed into signing anything. Nathan looked completely lost now. Gloria, what are you talking about? Vanessa turned toward him immediately. She is upset because she nearly got fired after that disaster in the kitchen earlier this week. There it was again. Immediate redirection. Immediate damage control. But the room had already changed. Once doubt enters a conversation, people begin hearing everything differently. I remained standing beside the fireplace with Harold's folder still in my hands. Gloria, I said calmly, tell the truth. Vanessa's eyes snapped toward me so quickly that even Howard flinched slightly in his chair. Gloria swallowed hard before speaking again. On Tuesday morning, I saw Mrs. Vanessa put something into Mrs. Carter's coffee. The room froze completely. Nathan stared at Gloria as though he no longer recognized the words coming out of her mouth. That is insane, Vanessa said instantly. She is lying. But her voice arrived half a second too quickly. Too sharp. Too emotional. One of the board members slowly removed his glasses while looking between us. Howard had gone pale. Nathan stood up abruptly from his chair. What did you put in the coffee? Vanessa looked at him in disbelief. Nothing. Are you seriously listening to this? Then why did Gloria spill it? I asked quietly. Vanessa turned toward me. Because she is careless. Gloria shook her head immediately. No, I spilled it because I was afraid. The storm outside cracked faint thunder across the distance while nobody inside the room moved. Wealthy people spend years believing control comes from money or status. But real control comes from remaining calm while everyone else begins unraveling. Vanessa crossed her arms tightly. This is absurd. A housekeeper suddenly makes accusations and everyone believes her. Not everyone, I replied softly. Then I removed my phone from my purse and placed it carefully onto the coffee table between us. I also had the remaining coffee residue tested. Nathan stared at me. Tested? At a private laboratory in New Haven yesterday morning. Vanessa's face lost color instantly. Just slightly. But enough. I opened the digital report slowly and handed the phone toward Nathan. The results identified traces of a cardiac stimulant that can cause dangerous symptoms when combined with blood pressure medication. Nathan's eyes moved rapidly across the screen. This cannot be real, he whispered. Vanessa stepped forward immediately. Anyone could fake a report. The laboratory director signed it personally, I answered. And the sample chain was documented. Howard closed his eyes briefly. Tiny movements reveal guilt more clearly than words ever do. Nathan looked from me to Vanessa with growing horror. Tell me this is not true. Vanessa's composure cracked for the first time since I had known her. I was trying to help this family, she snapped suddenly. You have no idea what I have dealt with for the past year. The room went completely still again. She realized her mistake immediately. Not denial. Justification. Help us by declaring me incompetent. I asked quietly. You were already slipping, Vanessa said, breathing harder now. Everyone could see it. Everyone? I repeated softly. Or only the people you kept repeating it to? Nathan stepped backward slowly like a man waking from anesthesia. Vanessa. His voice sounded small. Confused. Broken. She turned toward him desperately. Nathan, listen to me. Your mother has been unstable since your father died. Howard agreed she needed supervision. Every eye in the room shifted instantly toward Howard. He looked trapped now. Truly trapped. Howard? Nathan asked. Howard removed his glasses with shaking fingers. There were concerns raised, he said carefully. Concerns raised by Vanessa, I answered calmly. Supported by a physician she selected personally. One of the board members stood slowly from his chair. Perhaps this conversation should continue with independent counsel present. Another board member nodded immediately. The balance inside the room had shifted completely now. Vanessa saw it happening in real time. The authority she spent months building was collapsing in front of witnesses she could no longer control. Then Gloria spoke one final time from beside the doorway. There is something else. Vanessa closed her eyes briefly as though bracing herself. Gloria reached into her apron pocket with trembling hands and removed a small digital recorder. Mr. Harold gave me this last spring, she whispered. He said if anything ever happened to Mrs. Carter, I should not stay silent. Nathan stared at the recorder in disbelief. What is on that? Gloria looked directly at Vanessa before answering. Conversations people thought nobody else could hear. The sound of rain faded into the background as Gloria placed the recorder carefully onto the coffee table. Nobody moved. Nobody even reached for a drink. The entire room had become suspended inside one terrible moment where truth finally demanded space. Vanessa stared at the recorder with open panic now, no longer bothering to hide it behind polished smiles and measured words. Nathan looked as though the ground beneath him had disappeared completely. I had seen my son heartbroken before. When Harold died. When his first business failed in his 20s. But this was different. This was the look of a man realizing his entire reality may have been quietly engineered by the person sleeping beside him every night. Play it, one of the board members said softly. Gloria looked toward me first. I nodded once. Her trembling fingers pressed the small silver button. Static crackled briefly through the room before voices emerged. Vanessa's voice. Clear. Calm. Familiar. She is already forgetting things. Another few months and nobody will question guardianship. A second voice answered quietly. Howard. You need to move carefully. Harold added protections before he passed. Then Vanessa again. Colder this time. Nathan will sign anything if he thinks it protects the company. The room became impossibly still. Nathan slowly lowered himself into the nearest chair without taking his eyes off the recorder. Another section of audio played. Vanessa laughing softly. Once Evelyn steps aside, everything becomes much simpler. Then a pause. Then the sentence that finally shattered whatever remained of her carefully built image. At her age, people expect decline anyway. Gloria stopped the recording. Silence followed. Heavy. Suffocating. Vanessa looked around the room desperately, searching for control she could no longer find. This proves nothing, she said quickly. Conversations can be manipulated. But her voice had changed completely now. No warmth. No elegance. Only panic wrapped in anger. Nathan looked at her slowly. Did you say those things? She stepped toward him immediately. Nathan, listen to me. I was trying to protect our future. By convincing people my mother was losing her mind, he asked quietly. She reached for his arm, but he stepped back before she could touch him. That small movement hurt her more than shouting ever could have. Because rejection in silence leaves nowhere to hide. Howard finally stood from his chair looking 20 years older than he had at dinner. I should leave, he said weakly. No, one of the board members replied firmly. I think you should stay. Howard lowered himself back into the chair without another word. Outside, lightning flashed faintly beyond the rain-soaked windows while the fire crackled softly behind me. I looked around the room at people who had spent months questioning my stability without ever asking themselves who benefited most from those doubts. Wealth often creates arrogance. People begin believing manipulation only happens in other families, other neighborhoods, other marriages. But betrayal wears tailored suits just as easily as desperation. Vanessa straightened her posture slowly as though trying to rebuild dignity from the ruins around her. I loved this family, she said quietly. I gave everything to this family. No, I answered calmly. You studied this family. Her eyes snapped toward mine. For the first time since Harold died, I no longer felt grief speaking through me. Only clarity. You learned what everyone feared, I continued softly. You learned Nathan feared failure. You learned Howard feared conflict. And you believed I feared aging. Nobody interrupted. But you made one mistake, I said. You assumed age makes people easier to erase. Vanessa looked away first. Nathan covered his face briefly with one hand before standing slowly. I cannot do this tonight, he whispered. He looked toward me then, and the pain in his eyes nearly broke my heart despite everything. Mom. I did not know. I believed him. That was the tragedy underneath all of it. Nathan was not cruel. He was weak. And weak people often become tools for stronger personalities without realizing it until damage has already been done. I know, I said quietly. Vanessa stared at him in disbelief. You are choosing her over me. Nathan laughed once. Bitterly. Exhaustedly. You made me choose a long time ago. I was just too blind to see it. The board members began quietly gathering their coats while avoiding direct eye contact with anyone. Nobody wanted to remain inside the wreckage longer than necessary. Howard approached me last. His hands trembled slightly as he spoke. Evelyn. I failed Harold. Yes, I answered honestly. He lowered his eyes and walked away without another word. An hour later the house finally became quiet again. Police were not called that night. I did not want spectacle. Some endings do not require sirens to leave permanent scars. Vanessa packed 2 suitcases before midnight while Nathan remained downstairs alone in Harold's study staring into darkness for nearly 3 hours. Gloria helped me extinguish candles after everyone left. Are you all right, Mrs. Carter? She asked softly. I looked around the silent house that no longer felt poisoned by secrets. Then I thought about Harold's note hidden inside the trust documents. Time reveals intentions better than emotion ever will. He had been right. In the end, time revealed everything. I touched Gloria's hand gently and smiled for the first time in months. Yes, I said quietly. I think I finally am.